Hi Year 11, in this video we're going to look at the following three areas for Chemistry Paper 2. I do want to point out that the first part covers both foundation tier and higher tier chemistry, and then we'll stop there and move on to what is higher tier only content, and I will make it clear as we're going through the video exactly when that occurs. So we're going to start with synthetic polymers and natural occurring polymers. So again, this is all within your booklet that you were given before we broke up, before we sort of finished our, I think before we broke up for half term. So we're going to start off with polymerization and what that word actually means. So poly means many, okay? So the word poly, if you see the word polymer, then that means many. And polymerization is about turning monomers, okay, into polymers. And there are different types of polymerization. The one we're going to look at first of all is what we call addition polymerization. But it's essentially taking small chains and joining them together chemically to make a long chain. So mono means one, okay, and poly means many. So long chain. So basically the monomers are going to join together to make this big long chain. And a chemical reaction has to occur for that to take place. So the first type of polymerization we're going to look at is addition polymerization. And this is essentially adding monomers together. So monomers, to start with, you need to know a little bit about what makes something a monomer. So it's usually a small molecule, okay? So as you can see here, I've got my small molecule here. And in this case, you can see it's got that double bond, which we've talked about before, means that it is unsaturated. Now, what that means is that bond can quite easily break if you give it the right conditions. So you can see I've got my monomer molecules here, and they are going to react together under the right conditions. So the conditions they normally react under are high pressure and a catalyst. And as you can see, the double bond has been broken and the monomer units have joined together to make this long chain, which we call our polymer. Now, a couple of things I need you to be aware of here is that polymers are essentially long molecules made up of monomers. Okay, we're going to write that down. Polymers are long molecules formed from small molecules called monomers. Okay, and that process is called polymerization. And when we have addition polymerization, as we do in this case, we do not make anything additional other than just the polymer. So in addition polymerization, no small molecules are made. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is you might get asked to compare this to condensation polymerization. And condensation polymerization, as the name says, condensation, you will make a small molecule. And we'll talk about that when we come to look at condensation polymerization. So just be aware that in addition polymerization, you only make the polymer. You do not make an additional substance. Whereas if you're comparing that to condensation polymerization, you do. Now, I can also draw my polymer in a different way. So to save me writing this out as a big, long chain, I can, in fact, use brackets. And I'm going to draw an example of this polymer here in the form that you might get it seen as. So can you see how I've got my brackets around the molecule, and I've got the lines coming out across the brackets, and then I have a little N there. Now, I've seen exam questions where they ask you to tell them what that means. But what's inside the bracket is, or would have been, the original monomer. So as you can see here, the double bond is broken. So actually, I can draw the monomer from that picture because it must have been C double bond like that. So you can actually spot the monomer from the type of polymer you've got. And that's what they sometimes get you to do, which is why I've got identifying monomers and polymers next. So as you can see, I've got my brackets with the line coming out from the brackets. I've got my little n, and you might be asked to match the monomer to the polymer. You're just looking for repeating units. So can you see in the first one, it's all H's. In the second one, it's got 1 Cl off that carbon. Oh, look, it's got 1 Cl. Okay, so you can see that it matches. And we know that the monomers, to turn into polymers, the double bond has to break. So here we've got propene. The double bond is there, which is why the CH3 goes down there like that. But essentially, that is where the double bond would be. So you might get asked to draw the monomer from the polymer picture. Again, you just use what's in the image that you've got there. So if I had a polymer like this, okay, you might be asked to draw the monomer for that. Okay, so if I was drawing the monomer, I know the double bond takes place there. So I look at the original C, so there's the CH3, like so. That's joined to the carbon that has got an F attached to it. And another H, which then is joined to a carbon double bond, which is why I don't need that H. F like so. Okay, so that's how you can then draw the monomer from the polymer. Okay, so that's where the double bond took place right there. CH3 is that thing there, and it just allows you to then work it out. So you can then see you've got your two F's there, so you can match them up if that's what's necessary, you could be asked to do. So whatever's inside the brackets, whatever image you see there, that's where the double bond will in fact be in the monomer. Okay, so just be aware you might need to match those up. Now that's synthetic polymers. We're now going to look at natural polymers. So natural are not man-made. These are things that exist in nature. So the first one we're going to look at is this lovely structure here, which you will know as DNA. So DNA is an example of a natural polymer, and you need to be able to describe the structure of DNA. So the first thing you need to say is that it's two polymer chains. And this links to biology. And the two polymer chains are actually held together by crosslinks. Now that's actually bonds. So they're held together like that. And they form as a result a double helix. Now we know polymers are made up of monomers. So you have to remember that in DNA, they have got monomers. They actually have 4 monomers. And again, you need to remember that number. They are A, G, C, and T, which you know as the bases of DNA. They're actually nucleotides. And those nucleotides, as you can see, form the polymer chain, which is why the polymer chain are called polynucleotides. You see, I'm just adding the word poly to that. So that then forms our DNA, which we know then codes for our genes and characteristics from biology. So sometimes it's a 3 marker. I've seen it as a 4 marker on a foundation tier paper. You need to be able to describe the structure. So double helix, 4 monomers, nucleotides are the 4 monomers, and they all join together and form the 2 polymer chains, which are polynucleotide chains. Okay. In addition to that, you've also got starch. So you can see down the bottom, I've given you starch, which is here. And starch is essentially the polymer, the long chain. And the monomer that joins together to make starch would be sugar. And in this case, glucose. So starch is the polymer, and sugar molecules, glucose, join together to make starch. You may get asked about proteins. So proteins are again the polymer, and they are made up from amino acids. And we do talk about the structure of amino acids in higher tier, but you just need to be aware that amino acids are the monomer for proteins. And again, this is all in biology paper 1. And then cellulose, which is the cell wall, is another example of a natural polymer that is made up from sugars, which are the monomers. So these are your natural polymers. So you've got DNA, starch, and proteins. Cellulose are all examples of natural polymers, whereas what we've talked about previously are your synthetic ones, the ones that are man-made. So if you are foundation tier, that is all you need to know about polymerization. So you are done. Higher tier, I'm afraid you're stuck with me. We're going to look at 2 other things, which is the condensation polymerization and amino acid structure. And they're relatively straightforward. I touch on these in the carboxylic acid alcohols ester video. So again, I'd watch that before you do this part of it, because it is important you understand structures before you can then understand what condensation polymerization actually is. So here is an example of condensation polymerization. It looks complicated, but it's not, okay? So first thing, condensation, you think of the word water. So basically we've got a polymerization reaction. So 2 smaller monomers are joining together. And when they join together, we also produce a small molecule, which could be water. I do want to point out it's not always, so just be careful. And I'll show you that in the exam questions I've got in here. But we'll talk through that and sort of, hopefully it'll explain what I mean by that. So we've got polymerization making a long chain from repeating units, which are monomers. So in this case, we've got 2 monomers. And there's 2 different types. So addition polymerization, you only had 1 type that added together. Here we've got 2 monomers. I've got, as you can see from the functional group, that there is a carboxylic acid. This is why I've asked you to watch the carboxylic acid ester video. You need to know the structures first. So I've got my carboxylic acid structure, and over here, there's my functional group there. I have an alcohol. So my 2 monomers in this case, we've got carboxylic acid and an alcohol, and they're going to join together to form an ester, okay? And you only need to remember the name of one ester, which was ethyl ethanoate, which is not what this is. So, but just be aware that you only need to remember the name of one and be able to draw one. So as you can see, I've got these 2 molecules joining together, and what comes out of that, so there's a H, and an O, they all join together to make the water, okay? And as I said earlier, they will refer to it as the small molecule that is also made. So you hear the word small molecule, think water, okay? Now here is where the ester link is taking place, and I know that because esters have got that lovely structure, what we call the Q. And again, we talk about that when we go over the structure of an ester. So this is a condensation polymerization reaction. We're going to go through what that means. So we've got monomers that are different. So they've got different functional groups. That's the first thing I want to know. Number 2, we've got monomers react together and bonds form at the functional group. Okay, and that's where you can see this is where the reaction's taking place at the functional group of the alcohol and the carboxylic acid. And for each new bond, a small molecule of water will form. So for each new bond, a small molecule Now, you might be asked how many water molecules. It might give you a chain and you've got to spot the ester link. And know at each ester link, there would have been a water molecule produced. So you might have to work out how many is produced. I haven't seen that, if I'm honest, but you never know. Small molecules of water will be formed. And it's not always just water. So just look for what is missing. Okay, so just look for what's missing if you're asked to identify the small molecule produced. In a condensation polymerization, it is always water. I was pointing that out. Condensation means water. But I've seen them give you questions where they're talking about polymerization. They give you two different functional groups, and you've got to identify the small molecule that's produced. So don't always think it's just water. Water's the case if it's a condensation polymerization reaction. In other cases, it might not be, and I'll do some exam questions on that with you in a second. What I do want to point out is that to save confusing you, rather than draw out the full structure, sometimes they will put a box. Now, can you see how over here, that box would actually be C6H4? Now, the reason why we use the box is because it's not the functional group. Okay, so in other words, we don't want to be looking at that. We want to purely look at the functional groups because we've just said that's where they will chemically join together. So you might see these little boxes sometimes as they draw the structures like that. Do not worry. What you're looking at is the bits before and after it. As you can see here, I've got my Q. So I've got my Q, so that tells me it's an ester. If it's an ester, I should know that's carboxylic acids and alcohols that have joined together. So here is the ester link, and that would be where the water molecule would be produced. Okay, so this one would have been, if I had to draw the monomer for that, I'd be drawing a C double bond O, OH, C double bond O, OH, because that's my carboxylic acid. And I can see I've got two O's either side of that one. So that's going to be OH, OH. Okay, and that's that part of the ester link. So you might have to draw the monomers that make the polymer. It doesn't matter. It's just a box. It saves you writing them all out. So I just want to make sure we're clear on the difference between addition polymerization and condensation polymerization. So we're going to do a little table. So we're going to have addition polymerization and condensation polymerization. So one monomer, usually an alkene, double bond C, can have two or more with the same functional group or different. You could even have one with two different functional groups. It just depends. You only make one product in additional polymerization, that's the polymer. Whereas here you make two products, the polymer and the small molecule, which is usually water. And in terms of where the polymerization takes place, it's usually with an alkene here. So you get your C double bond C, and it's usually where you have your two functional groups coming together. You could be asked to evaluate, maybe not evaluate, but explain the differences between the two types of polymerization. So they're the key things you want to make sure you're including. Okay, so we're going to look at some exam questions on that now, because as I said to you, it's important you're able to see what it actually looks like. So here's an exam question. You know I've talked all year about bugging the question, so pause the video, bug the question, and then come back to me. Right, so hopefully you've bugged the question. Let's see if you've bugged it the way I would bug it. So it says figure 3 shows 3 monomers. That word there, I'm thinking polymer, because they're going to join together to make a polymer. Monomer A, which is here, can react with monomer B and with monomer C to produce polyesters. So A is going to react with B and C. Okay, first question. Draw a circle on figure 3 around an alcohol functional group. So figure 3, here we are, alcohol functional group. I know that's my alcohol functional group there. Now, they're the kind of questions you would miss because there's no space to write an answer. So just be careful, take your time with it because they can catch you out, those ones. F, completes the table below to show the formula of the small molecule produced. Oh, there's that question, that prompt again. So I've got monomer A, which is my alcohol, reacting with monomer B, which is my carboxylic acid. So I can see they're going to react and they're going to produce water, H2O. Okay, so those three things there, are going to react together to make water. If I've got A reacting with C, so I've got to form the Q. Remember, that is the ester link. And in order to form the Q with that one, we would have to take away the H and the Cl, wouldn't we? And that would then form the Q. So that would be HCl, which is hydrochloric acid. Okay, so the key things in the question there is polyester. Esters have the Q. I'm looking to form the Q, so whatever I need to take away will help me to form the ester link. Okay, let's look at another exam question on this. So figure 4 shows part of the structure of polyester. I'm thinking Q again. Complete the box in figure 4. So they've given me the box, but I've got to look at the bonds between it. So I can see I've got an O, so that's going to have a double bond, single bond because the carbon needs to have 4 lines, and single bond like that, and that would be worth 2 marks. Again, these are the kinds of questions you can miss, so take your time, read the question carefully. Name the small molecule produced when ethanidol reacts with butanoic acid. Okay, so we've got an ol reacting with an acid, so we should know that that is water because it's condensation reaction. Then you have carboxylic acid reacting with an alcohol. Starch, proteins, and DNA are all naturally occurring polymers. Name the monomers from which starch and proteins are produced. So we know starch. You get the mark for saying sugars, glucose, which is sugar. Proteins, we should know that that is amino acids. We've already talked about that. So nice and straightforward. You just got to learn those, I'm afraid. And then finally, describe the structure of DNA. So we should be saying 2 polymer chains, 4 monomers, A, G, C, and T, which are called nucleotides. And they join together to form a polynucleotide chain, which will be a double helix. Okay, so lovely question if that came up. It didn't come up last year, I don't think, so it's a good one if it does come up. Final thing we're going to look at are amino acids. And again, we've got a new functional group here, which is the amine functional group. But we should know that amino acids are the monomers to form proteins. So monomers and polymer, because it's called a polypeptide chain. Okay, so I will put that in there. So proteins, fancy name, are polypeptide chains. And you have got a whole variety of different amino acids within your body. They chemically join together to form proteins. You'll know from biology that proteins can be used in your immune system. They're used for enzymes, which means they're very much dependent on the conditions. So again, they might link into the uses. But I'm hoping you can see here is an amino acid. That is an amino acid. Again, I could draw it with a box. So you might have, for example, C double bond OOH with a box in the middle, NHH. So Again, they might use that box, that middle group. I don't need to think about the box. It's what's on each side, which is the functional groups. So I can see that there is a carboxylic acid because I've looked at the structures of that before. And this is the part we haven't looked at before, which is NH2. And NH2 is my amino group. Okay, so that's my amino functional group, amine amino functional group. So NH2. Okay, so you can see I've got one amino acid, which is going to bond to another amino acid. And I'm hoping you can already work out that actually to do that, we require a condensation reaction. So I'm going to make water. And as a result of that, water is the small molecule produced. And I can see here that would be the peptide link. We call it the peptide bond. Okay, so that there would have been where the water molecule would have been. Now I'm just going to draw that out for you so you can see it taking place. I'm going to use the boxes for time. So here is the first amino acid, like so, reacting with the other amino acids. Ooh, draw it right. With the box, NH2. And I can see that that there is going to be removed to make water. And so I'm going to draw them bonded together, NH with my little box. Okay, and so essentially I'm looking for that link, NH, C double bond O, because that's my peptide bond. Okay. There are different amino acids that go together to make different polypeptide chains, which will make different proteins. That's why we have different amino acids. So it's just being able to spot that, being able to draw it, being able to tell us that water is in fact produced to form that. So I just want to kind of finish, I suppose, by just doing like a summary of all of the functional groups, just so you remember them all. So we've got our alcohol, which is an OH group. You've got your carboxylic acids, which looks like that. You've got your ester link, which looks like that. You've got your peptide link, which looks like that. You've got your amine group or amino group, which looks like that. So it's just being able to spot these different functional groups to then talk about how they then might join together to form the peptide bond like that, for example, or the ester link, because we know that those two join together to make that. We also know an amino acid joins with a carboxylic acid to make the protein or the peptide bond. So it's just being mindful of the different functional groups and how they do in fact link together. So I hope you found that useful. Any questions, as always, please don't hesitate to ask, and we will leave it there for this video.